What up, it's Jack, aka Just a Cunt here. Today I wanted to talk about a new series that I am creating. What if UFC Legends returned? This episode is going to feature BJ Penn, Benson Henderson, and Khabib Nurmagomedov and how they would do against the lightweight division, specifically the top 5 and the current champion. Anyway, I hope y'all enjoy it. Let's start off with a breakdown of the prodigy, BJ Penn. BJ was born in Kailua, Hawaii, and trained out of multiple teams and gyms such as Jackson Wink and his own BJ Penn MMA. Being the second 2-division champ, BJ did most of his best work at lightweight, where he eventually won his belt against Joe Stevenson and defended against Sean Shirk, Kevin Florian, and Diego Sanchez before he lose it to Frankie Edgar, where his lightweight record would stand for 4 years, being tied only by Benson Henderson and Khabib Nurmagomedov, and only broken 16 years later by Islam Makhachev. BJ was known for his jiu-jitsu and willingness to fight anyone and anywhere. While he would struggle greatly later in his career, he would be remembered for his wins over Matt Hughes and, as mentioned, his run at lightweight, making him one of the greatest lightweights and fighters of all time. Now, looking at how he compares to the current best at 135 is a little unfair to say the least. While yes, BJ was revolutionary for his time, as we've seen later by his move to featherweight, BJ is quite undersized, underskilled, and lacks any physicality to compete with even anyone ranked at lightweight, let alone the elite of the elite. Quickly going over the fighters included, I feel against Dustin, he just doesn't have the takedowns and wrestling to even take down Dustin, and even if he did, I just can't see him submitting the fellow black belt. And on the feet, he would get slaughtered. As we saw in his fight against Nate Diaz, BJ is quite easy to back up, doesn't move his head, and doesn't have any footwork to deal with the offense of Dustin. And unfortunately, as we will see later on, he doesn't really fare any better with the rest of the division. But before I spend the whole video just making fun of BJ, it's important to look at the sport as evolving and always changing. You can look 5 years ago at Paulo Costa, who was the top contender at middleweight and predicted by many to beat Izzy. But after just half a decade, he can't even muster up a decent win over Luke Rockhold and has lost every other fight. The fighters aren't helped with time and can be left in the past if they aren't exceptional. While BJ is a historic fighter and should be remembered for his mentality and prodigy at BJJ, now comparing him to the top of lightweight, he just can't compete. With that being said, let's look at our next legend, and it's said by Joe Rogan, the inventor of the calf kicks and the only fighter to fight with a mouse pick in the cage. Now let's see how Benson Smooth Henderson does against the current lightweight division. Born in Colorado Springs, the American-born champ Benson Henderson is a dynamic, all-around fighter known for his kicks and top control with a smooth style, as can be reflected by his nickname. Benson fought in the more modern MMA landscape as fighters would grow to be well-rounded and complete everywhere. Benson Henderson would win his title from Frankie Edgar, who BJ Penn lost his belt to, and would then beat him in a rematch with a subsequent 2 more title defenses over Nate Diaz and Gilbert Melendez before losing it to Anthony Pettis. We can more easily compare Benson to the modern era as he has competed with modern fighters such as Jorge Masvidal, RDA, and Nate Diaz, beating 2 of them. Where Benson lacks is in a couple of ways. When looking at his loss to RDA and Pettis, we can see against the highest level of competition, he likes to pressure, hold people against the fence, and focus on top position to gain control. He can be very telegraphed in this, where he was kneed and then KO'd by RDA, who as we've seen later isn't known for finishing top modern competition, and against Pettis was submitted with an armbar off his back. Something you just don't see in the lightweight division, even with killers like Oliveira, who can fight in a similar way. What Benson and BJ are missing is truly elite skill set that can be used to impose their will. They seem to be outsized, outgunned, and outskilled against the likes of Holloway and Oliveira and the other fighters who are all well-rounded. In many ways, these fighters' weakest part of their game is BJ's and Benson Henderson's strongest part of their games. Besides the lack of Justin Gaethje and his BJJ, there's not too many areas in which Benson and BJ can potentially beat these modern opponents. that is not something the next legend and former lightweight champion GOAT, Khabib the Eagle Nurmagomedov, struggles with. Born in Silesia, Russia, Khabib, having trained at AKA for a large part of his career, also spent a lot of time of his career in Dagestan under his father Abdulbanap, where he would stamp his legacy as not only one of the two greatest lightweights of all time, but one of the greatest fighters of all time. Known for his chain wrestling from long distance, shots from space, and cage wrestling that leads to arguably the greatest ground and pound of all time and nasty submissions, such as his mounted triangle on Justin Gaethje, rear naked on Dustin Poirier, and his neck crank over Conor McGregor. Khabib isn't a slouch on the feet either. Having dropped multiple fighters such as Conor McGregor, on the feet his boxing focus was a great jab, footwork, while something unorthodox, his sporadic head movement has only led to him being rocked 2 times. We are not too far from the Khabib era, as he retired October of 2021 after the tragic passing of his father. The division would change radically. The first to take the crown after Khabib left was Charles "Du Bronx" Oliveira, a Muay Thai Jiu-Jitsu specialist who is well-rounded and can finish anyone at any point in a fight. Looking at all these champ styles, we see they counter each other depending on where the fight goes. I feel on the feet, Charles had an advantage striking, having had fought more powerful strikers such as Justin, Dustin, and Chandler. With a level of skill, specifically with the kicks, I can see doing damage to Khabib. Unfortunately for Charles though, I feel he can have a lot of success on the feet against Khabib. On the ground, it's a different story. Charles is one of the greatest jiu-jitsu players in the history of the sport. With incredible transitions and submissions, he can control high-level jiu-jitsu players such as Dustin the Diamond Poirier and Tony El Kakui Ferguson, while pulling off submissions against Justin. The problem is that when faced with wrestlers with physicality and ground and pound, he can't implement his game. For example, even against Beneil Dariush, who isn't nearly as opposing as Khabib, he was able to take down and control Charles. Charles will later get up and TKO Beneil with a head kick and ground and pound. But even Islam and Arman, who are quite comparable to Khabib, specifically Arman, I don't see Khabib having any trouble taking down and landing devastating ground and pound, and can even set up an arm triangle. Khabib, on the other hand, has been close to getting submitted, such as against Dustin Poirier with a guillotine, which is one of Charles' specialties. In this fight, I see with his jab and footwork, he will stay on the outside against Conor, while Charles comes to Khabib's hands high with teeps and long-range strikes. After Oliveira would eventually overextend or make a mistake, Khabib will shoot from range and then chain wrestle into dominant positions. As the fight goes on, I see Khabib getting more and more comfortable, where Charles will throw up submission, occasionally getting up or even landing some decent shots on Khabib, but ultimately I can see Khabib rocking Charles later into the fight to a submission or ground and pound TKO in the 3rd or 4th round. Fighters who I feel will lose it well are Dustin. While he has improved and I feel like he can make it more interesting, I feel like even with a little bit more on the time on the feet, he'd eventually get controlled, submitted once again. Justin Gaethje, pretty self-explanatory. He's taken down and subbed again. Justin hasn't shown anything that he can do anything different than. While I feel like his striking has arguably gotten a bit better, grappling-wise, I don't see anything different really happening. And Max Holloway, unfortunately, especially with his lack of finishing ability on the feet, I think that Khabib wouldn't have too much to fear when being aggressive on it, and Holloway has been taken down by lesser grapplers such as Ilias and Volks. I think he would potentially make it to a decision in a decent fight, but ultimately a quite clear winner, if not dominant win, by Khabib. What may be controversial here is that I believe Arman Tsarukyan can make this fight very competitive on the feet and on the ground. Khabib, when trying not to get the finish over the fight, will apply more and more pressure on the feet with jabs and twos and an occasional long teep to the face. Arman, on the other hand, has a balance of finishes and decisions. When going against Mateusz Gamrot, an aggressive wrestler, he would try to mix it up with aggressive wrestling with jabs, 2-3 punch combinations, and a body kick or head kick to mix it up against Gamrot. While not gassed, it's pretty clear to say that at least in the last 2 rounds against Gamrot, Arman was not quite getting mauled, but he was getting held against defense, where he was forced to scramble. He will shoot a takedown, but not more than 2 or 3 times by the end of the fight. This fight is far more competitive and interesting than many will think. Khabib has shown in the Conor and Dustin fight Until he takes down and mauls his opponent, he's quite tentative on the feet and will try to use his fast and wild 2-3 punch combinations to set up takedowns to at least get his opponent to defense. When looking at Arman's fight with Islam, we can see the closest idea to how this fight can play out. For context, Arman was 22 when he fought Islam in his UFC debut. In this fight, Arman was playing defense. He would find most of his success against Islam in counter wrestling and taking him down in return. Islam struggled to keep Arman on the fence and found more success in the open, in the clinch with trips and throws. Khabib, in my opinion, will stand with Arman for a bit, where I feel in Arman's last fight against Oliveira, he will outstrike Khabib minorly with kicks but will struggle to land anything of meaning with his punches. Khabib will stay on the outside with his jabs and looks to overwhelm Arman with punches leading to a takedown or feint the takedown enough to shoot from the center of the cage. Arman will try to shoot first or out-scramble Khabib, whereas I don't think he'll put Khabib on his back and not for long, as I think Khabib will always be able to get back to his feet. Early on, I see this being a grueling tit-for-tat, position-for-position, skillful MMA match where Arman outstrikes Khabib minorly and they both get reversed and win different wrestling exchanges. Where I see this fight swaying Khabib's way is later in the fight, where he will pressure Arman more and more, while Arman loses some of that ability to explode and escape from bad positions and will soon accept some bad positions. Specifically along the cage, where I feel like Khabib can land his jab more and smother Arman's kick. I see this being a 3-2 or 4-1 in decision in Khabib's way, in a very competitive fight where no one can quite hurt each other, but Khabib having a solid win in the toughest fight of his career in terms of skill. Now we could talk about the most interesting fight in the history of this division, or even the sport, was Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Islam Makhachev. Starting with Islam, the lightweight GOAT, which wins over Oliveira, Volkanovski twice, Dustin Poirier, Dan Hooker, and Renato Moicano, and more. A well-balanced but grappling-focused fighter, Islam uses sharp and powerful kickboxing to set up dominant grappling. Khabib, for those who don't know, trained with and trained directly Islam in Dagestan with his father Abdulmanap. Khabib and Islam, while growing and training together, differ greatly in how they win. Khabib is more wrestling/sambo focused, specifically on ground and pound and overall damage. Islam will hold position more and attack submissions, while Khabib will use submissions such as against Poirier, but prefers to put his opponents against the fence and stack them and then rain ground and pound after exhausting his opponents, then latch up his submissions. Islam is more of a traditional tactician, and where Khabib is more brutal on the ground, Islam will scrap more on the feet and is more well-rounded and better overall as a striker. I think a big factor in this fight is how you view both of their fights with Dustin. Islam was less dominant and took more damage than Khabib, where besides getting rocked and almost gillied, took Dustin down with ease and latched up multiple submissions, where eventually he would lock up a rear naked choke in the third round. Dustin against Islam was more competitive, as besides round 1 where Islam chased a Kimura after taking him down and mauling him, Dustin would work his way back to his feet and land hard shots, particularly in the clinch, as Islam loves his Muay Thai plum, but that would result in Dustin slicing his face open and landing hard shots to the body and face. With this back and forth came a conclusive end, as after Dustin would defend an onslaught of takedowns, he would then finally succumb to them with a golf swing and then get darced by Islam. If you want to say Dustin simply improved and with having Gamera in his camp training him and improving his grappling, or simply Islam isn't as good as a wrestler as Khabib, this should be a great insight as to how you think a matchup between these two fighters would go. Some intangibles are Islam is 5'10", where Khabib is 5'8" to 5'9". Islam has a 70.5 inch reach, about the same as Khabib's 70 inch. Islam's legs appear to be longer as well, with overall Islam having a bigger frame and a little bit stronger than Khabib, where I feel Khabib is quite a bit faster, at least in the hands. I just see this fight going in many different ways, with Khabib being able to take down Islam, who will stay on his back given enough pressure, but I think Islam can get around. I think Islam can and would take down Khabib and even have some control. I just don't see him dealing a lot of damage, rather preferring to chase the back and rack up control time. But with Khabib, I see him taking down Islam once or twice most of the rounds and landing ground and pound, even if it means Islam getting back up. I see Islam in the clinch, where Khabib is chasing takedowns, landing knees, elbows, and shots off the break, where on the feet, where I see Islam staying for most of the fight, landing kicks and outstriking Khabib. Where we may see a desperate Khabib who, while on the ground, can land damage, besides a jab or fast overhand, can't hit or hurt Islam really. I see this 3-2 Islam Makhachev, winning the early rounds and Khabib landing ground and pound with some offense, struggling to control Islam. In the fifth, if Khabib can wear on Islam, I can see a dominant end where he holds Islam on bottom, landing bombs. I don't mind saying Khabib wins, but I believe that Islam fought a better fight against Dustin than Khabib and has simply fought better competition with different styles. In conclusion, I view this being a razor close win for the lightweight GOAT, Islam Makhachev. In conclusion, I find that while BJ Penn and Benson Henderson would be unfit to compete in the current division, I do feel that Khabib Nurmagomedov would still be either the best lightweight or the second best. I feel that besides Arman Tsarukyan and maybe some trolls from Oliveira, I don't see too many fighters posing a problem for him, as I feel they all in some way are affected by Khabib's strongest asset, and that being his pressure and his grappling, on top of him not being bad on the feet. I mean, he was able to stand with McGregor and even win rounds, even with Conor McGregor cheating. Say what you want about him being injured in that fight, but Conor, for the most part, even with a broken foot, should be able to beat Khabib on the feet, and while winning a round, it definitely wasn't enough for me to be like, Khabib is in danger at all times. I don't see at any point anyone be able to just shut down the wrestling, where I feel BJ Penn and even Benson Henderson came from a time where everyone was still trying to figure out what exactly works. And obviously, in the next 5 years, the game can greatly evolve. For what we know right now, it seems like people are really starting to figure out what works and really starting to highlight that, as even if you look at someone like Joel Alvarez, who is number 15 in the division, he is still much more deadly than BJ Penn or Benson Henderson, who are champions and arguably one of the greatest fighters of the time. And I don't even think they can get ranked. That's just trying to show how the game has evolved in the last 10 years. And even in the last 5, as I feel like Khabib is an exception to that. As if you look at a lot of the fighters that were quite dominant, even guys like Davison Figueiredo, who was before Brandon Moreno and even after the first fight was a dominant champion, we've seen that he just, as the competition has evolved, as the sport has increased, in general, people have started to figure each other out and see what really works. It's just, you can't rely on one trick. You can't just be good at BJJ. You have to be a world-class grappler with world-class striking. And maybe Khabib was, while he may struggle maybe a little bit offensively on the feet, as I don't know if he's gonna rock or put on master classes on the feet against these guys, and more so just do pretty good with his striking, with his jab, with his footwork, with his unorthodox head movement. I still feel that he has an elite skill set and something that we may not have even seen anyone surpass yet, besides maybe if you want to say Hamza Chimaev. I just feel like Khabib is someone that can still dominate the division. Even against welterweight, I can see him doing good against a Jack Della Maddalena. I think arguably he has a much better chance of beating JDM than Islam, as I think he's going to only grapple in that fight and just avoid any real danger from JDM. And even against other welterweights, I think that could be interesting. And I would like to maybe do a video breaking down how I feel Islam would do against the current welterweight division, and overall how'd he do against other all-time greats like GSP's an obvious one, a prime Kamaru Usman, etc, etc. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys want to see. If you guys like the more casual videos I've done, such as the UFC Fighter Fusion video, or if you prefer the more well-structured, scripted videos such as this, where we break down interesting topics such as what if UFC legends, what if Khabib returned back to try and take the throne against Islam Makhachev. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great one. Hope you guys have a great night. Have a good one.